And so for more on the situation right now on the border, we're joined by Natasha Pizzey. She's a freelance journalist in Mexico City. Thank you for joining us, Natasha.
Hi.
And first, we want to ask you, because you are there where things have happened, where you've managed to also speak to many of these individuals, what is the mood of so many of these migrants right now following the death of that 7-year-old girl?
Well, people are extremely frightened because they've put themselves through these grueling, dangerous journeys to get to the border, and now they're trying to figure out what comes next. And so when they hear of these terrible things happening to people like them trying to get to the American dream, they're very frightened, but they don't feel like they can turn back. And when I discussed the girl's death with migrants who were part of the caravan in Tijuana, where I've been, they almost said they didn't want to know because they feel they had no choice but to put themselves into that situation, and their children in many cases.
So we've got this report suggesting that 260 migrants have died trying to cross the border. In your experience in covering this, how common is it actually happening? And you say that the migrants don't really want to hear about it, but you must be hearing about it. What are you hearing about the frequency of these sorts of tragic incidents?
It's common. I mean, I'm sometimes surprised by how unreported it can be, but the figure I've seen is that at least 7,000 people have died trying to cross from Mexico into the US since 1998. And that figure is based on remains that have been found in the desert, for example, or migrants who died in custody. So that is a staggering figure. And migrants know that this happens. You know, they hear through their networks of friends and acquaintances who've done the journey that it is dangerous, but the driving factors motivating them to go are often, I guess, bigger than the fear that they have of going ahead and trying. And many of them are fleeing extreme violence in their home countries or extreme poverty, and so they feel it is worth a shot. But I frequently hear about things happening or accidents happening to migrants who've tried to cross.
So it sounds like more so than not, it's not stopping anyone from those motives that they have to continue crossing the border. But is it at all acting as a deterrent for anyone? Have you heard any stories like that?
Well, one thing that I've seen people really wrestle with is how to get into the US, because if you're at the border, you've done this grueling journey, you're exhausted, you're probably sick. I saw a lot of people with, respiratory illnesses, sprains, the kind of thing you would imagine after doing a journey like that, and they're figuring out their next step. So Border Patrol issues these statements asking people who are looking to seek asylum to turn themselves in legally at a port of entry. And that would mean going to where, cars can cross, pedestrians can cross. And that would be the safest way to do that. And that is what many people I spoke with want to do. They really want to do things correctly. However, the reality is Border Patrol has been overwhelmed by the numbers of family units handing themselves in like that, and they have a practice of restricting how many people they receive every day. That has created these backlogs of migrants at different border towns across the border, stranded in kind of informal camps and shelters, waiting for their turn to hand themselves in. And that means many families end up making this desperate decision to go other routes across that border, and they go to areas that are often more dangerous and have less physical obstacles put up by Border Patrol, like the fence, razor wire, to try and reach the US and hand themselves into Border Patrol. So I've seen so many people wrestling with this decision of do we stay in a border town for months in dangerous conditions, or do we try and go a dangerous route into the US?
Well, it's an awfully complicated situation, and I know we're quickly running out of time. So very quickly, I just finally wanted to ask you whether or not you are getting any sort of unofficial comment from those Border Patrol agents on how they're feeling in light of this recent death.
I haven't. I came back yesterday from the border point with San Diego. What I did see happen from a Border Patrol agent unofficially was I was sitting at the border. I had just watched a group of about 50 people, mainly families, cross the border fence into California and hand themselves into a waiting Border Patrol truck. And then the border official came back to the fence and shouted across that they had no more space in the cells for the night. And please, can anyone waiting to cross for asylum come back another day? Which was staggering to me. And he said it very politely, and families who were, in fact, assessing whether or not they should cross that night tried to take that into account as they made their decisions.
Really interesting observation. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Natasha. That is Natasha Pizzey, and she is a freelance journalist. She joined us from Mexico City.